Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Ethos Online. Whether you are in your living room again, wherever you are, thank you so much for joining us. We want this space online to be a place where you can be, belong, and become the very best version of yourself. And so, whatever we do, whatever we share, it all is wrapped up in the idea that to be human is to be miraculously made, right? Whether we believe we were literally made or evolved or whatever it is, to be human is a miracle. And there's so much goodness here. And so we oftentimes will go to the teachings of the Bible because there's so much interesting beauty there that many of us, we grew up with one narrative, one way of viewing it. But as we've evolved and grown, it's become bigger and better. And so today we're going to view a couple different ways to view, I would say, a teaching that has some baggage for some of us. And so I want to look at a word we call the law, right? I grew up with a tribe of people who we thought we got the law perfect. We were doing all the right things better than everybody else. The law. And so in this series, we're going to do a whole series on this. We're actually going to look at the Sermon on the Mount. And we're going to kind of dissect it piece by piece. And so today, we're going to view the law, the idea of what the law was, and what this whole thing meant to any Hebrew person, Jewish person, listening to Jesus on this mount. There would have been certain ideas and concepts and phrasing that would have been used to kind of trigger some Hebrew concepts and ideas. So the writers, they're essentially going to share some really powerful history with us, or I should say culture, past culture, to understand a present reality. And so today, moving through this, we're going to look at the first, this teaching of Jesus, and I'm going to kind of pick and choose. I'm going to kind of go all over the place, but I'm going to look at the concept of worry. But before we do, let's talk about Moses. Let's jump to Moses. Because when Jesus is on the Mount, when Jesus is sharing from the law, this story of Jesus sitting there on this mount would have been something that reminded Jewish people of another figurehead, a figurehead that Jesus is constantly being compared to. And so think about this. Moses goes up on the mount and he's given these rules, these regulations on how to live life. And they called these the 10 Commandments. And so Moses gets these and he comes down off the mount, right? He's still kind of on the mount and he shares it with his people. And for Hebrew people, they saw this as an absolute gift. Growing up, I did not think of rules and regulations as a gift. And truth be told, most people in our culture, it's got a negative rap. But when you think about rules and regulations, laws, if we did not have those things in place, if there weren't some kind of way of managing life, right, it would get a bit chaotic. It would be anarchy. People would get hurt. And so laws are actually a good thing. Laws are created to keep us safe. Now, again, we can misuse laws. We can twist laws in certain people's favor and hurt other people. But laws, the concept behind it is they're supposed to help us navigate ways to live more fully right now between us and our neighbor. And that's the idea there. And so when you think of the Israelites and this law that's been created, giving this law to the people, also understand that every single civilization, they've created laws, ways in which to live and navigate life. Every single one of them has. And so just look at Babylon, for instance. Babylon, here's a tribe of people, now watch this, a tribe of people that took their rules, regulations that they created, right, to navigate life more fully. And they actually took these rules, these regulations, and they put them on stone. Yeah? They put them on stone, and they actually put them in the middle of their city. Yeah, so that people could be reminded of them often. And so here's a couple of the rules, the regulations, the laws that were very important to Babylonians. And there were hundreds, of course. It went from how to navigate merchant interactions with people to whether you can be able to kill someone and what is deemed appropriate when it comes to murder. All those different things. They had tons of rules. Here's just a couple. One of the big ones written on the law, on the tablets that they had, was to always seek justice. Yeah. Another was worship. They had to learn to worship their gods, not other gods. That was a big one. Be fair in your dealings with your neighbor. Yeah, seems pretty legitimate. We oftentimes try to demonize Babylon. Babylon was a pretty sophisticated civilization. They really were. Another one, take care of the widow and the orphan among you. A rule, a regulation set by Babylon on their tablets. Here's Egypt. We often, again, we've demonized Egypt because of the Jewish narrative, but Egypt was actually a very civilized culture as well, just like Rome and Greece and so many others. So Egypt, again, their laws were written on stone tablets. Yes. Someone's like, yeah, of course they were. Here's a couple of their rules, regulations. Kind of flip from what we have today. A person was guilty until proven innocent. That's how their judicial system worked back then. Rape was not tolerated, and the abuser was sentenced to castration and then death. They took that as a powerfully evil thing to lord power over someone else. Way back then. Yeah, so one could say that some of the later civilizations, like the Israelites and others, could have learned something from them. Another one, workers were paid fair wages. This whole idea that the Israelites were there and they were slaves and they had to work on the pyramids, not historically accurate. The people who worked on the pyramids actually they were encamped around the pyramids and they were paid really well. And so again, lots of interesting things you learn from history, but all civilizations have some kind of rules, regulations. Many of the ancient ones, oftentimes like the Israelites, they wrote them on stone. So let's look at the Israelites here. The law is given. And so again, for any Jewish person, they understand these 10 commandments. They have all these interesting interconnections to all 613 of we call them the mini laws, right? The mitzvos. And so these 10, actually each one of the 10, you could subdivide hundreds of different ones into each one of them. And so anyone reading it understood, well, this actually means something far deeper. Yeah, honor your mother and father. There's something far deeper, a bunch of other rules and regulations that would follow under the 10. And so much like Egypt and Babylon, that's how they viewed it. And so it's interesting too, when you look at the 10 commandments, right? The first half of them, right? The first basically the first 4 are all about how they interact with their God, which is very similar to Egypt's commandments. So how they interact with their God. And then the second half, right? 5 through 10, all about how we interact as people together in community, how we live harmoniously. And so it's even interesting when you look at the last one, don't covet. This is really an interesting one because it's kind of the climax of the whole thing. It's like once you learn to master your emotions, right, then everything falls into place. When you master your emotions, your behaviors follow. And so there's so many interesting elements of like poetry and narrative all connected in their 10 commandments. It's actually it's a brilliant piece of work. And so they had these 10 commandments. And of course, they were given, they call this the law, right? The law is given, they felt, by the divine, which is what every single civilization believed, that their laws were passed down by their gods. And so Israel has the law. Now, again, fast forward thousands of years, and Jesus emerges onto the picture. And you have, again, the New Testament, and the writers begin to write about this first century rabbi, Jesus. And what Jesus does is he, again, is Moses 2.0. And so just like Moses, Jesus goes up onto a mount, and there on the mount, he begins to discuss the law. He begins to move through all these different mini laws, and he shows how all of them are interconnected. And so Jesus, essentially the law is going to be given again, and it's going to be explained even deeper, but simplified. So again, Moses 2.0, he goes up on the mountain, he begins sharing. And this is what we call the Sermon on the Mount. The Sermon on the Mount, where a rabbi, this is oftentimes what would happen, a rabbi would begin expanding on Torah, expanding on law, showing the beautiful intricacies and connections of everything. And so people would gather and listen. And so here you go. The sermon, one of my favorite writers says this, The Sermon on the Mount is actually a deeper critique into the heart of the law. It reclaims the beauty of living life in harmony. Think about that. Yeah, because the law now had years and years and years of new translations. People began to add certain things, take away certain things, and became very rigid. It was no longer something that was growing and evolving with its people. It became very rigid, and people would use it to hurt one another. And so what Jesus does is says, no. Let's go back to the heart of it. Let's go back to the beauty of this thing in the first place. And when you look at the intricacies and the beauties of this thing, it pops, it hums. And that's what Jesus is attempting to do. And so today, I wanted to look at chapter 6 in one of my favorite books. And essentially, we look at the Sermon on the Mount. And I'm just going to pick from one of my favorite portions first. And I'm going to continue doing this for the next couple of weeks, the Sermon on the Mount. I want to look at a concept that comes out about worry. Because again, worry, anxiety, it's often what leads us to making poor decisions. And whole civilizations have crumbled because people got nervous and scared and they reacted knee-jerkily, right? And so when Jesus begins talking about worry and anxiety, he says, you know what? The whole reason the law was put there in the first place was that we might live life calmly. We can trust that the whole thing is good, and that if we follow these rules, these ideas, if we put others before ourselves in certain places, we can have faith that we will live fully. We can live life abundantly. We don't have to worry. And so I wanted to look at the concept of worry, because right now we're getting close to Thanksgiving, then we get into Christmas, and Christmas time, even though it's a beautiful time, there's a lot of anxiety. Our culture is filled with anxiety, especially during the holidays. Look at this. We're a culture of anxiety. Let me read a couple of these to you. Anxiety disorders are the most common mental illness in the United States. Anxiety disorders affecting 40 million adults in the United States, age 18 and older, or 18.1% of the population every year. That's a huge chunk of people suffering, like really, really suffering from anxiety. Anxiety disorders are highly treatable, yet only 36.9% of those suffering receive treatment. 1 in every 5 Americans feels deeply anxious. That was a study done in 2018. Interesting. I would argue it's gotten worse through 19. We're about to approach 2020. Health, safety, and finances are the things we are deeply worried about in America. Those are some of our anxieties. We live in a very anxious, worried culture. And so look at Matthew 6:25. Jesus begins to combat it by referring back to the law, unwrapping it and showing the beauty of it. It even is applicable to how we live and function with anxiety. So here you go. Therefore, I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat or drink, or about your body, or what you will wear. Is not life more than food, and the body more than clothes? I like that. Is life more than food, and the body more than clothes? It's almost like a mystical kind of question, isn't it? It's a deep one, because what it's doing is it's saying, I want you to begin questioning your inventory. Look over the things that you value. It's really interesting. What's the purpose of life? But what's most important? What are the things to me that are most important? If in the middle of your crisis or your worry, what if you just pose that question that Jesus does? What if you just pose the question of, is this really that important? Like, in the grand scheme of things, is this that important to put all that energy and time into? Is it that important? Is it going to be, is this something to die for, right? Ask deeper questions of the thing, and you might get some interesting answers from it. Yeah, beautiful, right? It continues. Jesus says, look at the birds of the air. They do not sow or reap or store away in barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not much more valuable than they? Can any one of you, by worrying, add a single hour to your life? Think about that for a moment. When has worry ever served you well? Like, I'm talking about that deep, just anxious worry that you just like are just killing the thing to death. And essentially yourself, you're just living in it. When has imagining the worst case scenario over and over and over again in your life, when has that really served you well? When has that been a good thing for you? I would argue the majority of the time, probably not. Probably not. And so here's the beauty of Jesus' message right there is we have a choice. We have a choice. We don't have to live in the worry and the anxiety. We don't have to live there. We can choose differently. And so watch this. And why do you worry about clothes? See how the flowers of the field grow. They do not labor or spin. Yet I tell you that not even Solomon in all his splendor was dressed like one of these. If that is how God clothes the grass of the fields, which is here today and tomorrow is thrown into the fire, will he not much more clothe you, you of little faith? So do not worry, saying, what shall I eat? Or what shall we drink? Or what shall we wear? For the pagans run all after these things, and yet your heavenly Father knows what you need. What I like about this is, again, Jesus is not pointing to literalism here. He's actually bringing something really beautiful. He's saying, imagine. Like, look at the world and imagine something beautiful. Imagine basically a powerfully good outcome rather than a bad one. Think about the powerfully good things happening all around you that you don't even notice. Think about those things when you're tempted to worry. Think about the good things that are happening all around you. Focus on those things. Put your energy toward those. One of my favorite writers, he says this: worry and stress come from the way you relate to events or situations. Let me read it again because I don't know if you got it. Worry and stress comes from the way you relate to events or situations. He goes on to say this: things are just things. Events are merely events. Situations are only situations. It's up to you to supply your reaction to them. Yeah. It's your choice if you're going to get stressed or not. It's your choice to go to the worst case scenario or the best. It's your imagination. How will you imagine the thing? How will you imagine the thing going? Do you think of the worst or the best? And again, for Jesus, he says, if you want to live this thing fully, start looking at the birds and the bees and nature. Look at the bigger picture. There's so much goodness going on. Why not align yourself with that? And so Matthew continues, but seek first the kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. Therefore, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. So again, seek goodness and imagine a better world. If I could sum up what Jesus says there, seek goodness, imagine a better world, an abundant one, and then, of course, place yourself in it. What would it look like if I was living life more abundantly? Put yourself there. Imagine that. Put your energy toward that, and good things just seem to follow. It's beautiful. So the question, of course, Jesus expands on the law. He tells people not to worry. He says to align your imagination, your thoughts, all of it toward goodness, the goodness happening all around us. So, of course, the question is, how do I apply it? Right? How do we do this? Because, again, we could talk about it all day. We could read the teachings of Jesus, but if we don't learn to apply it right here, right now, we've essentially done nothing. And so think about this. There's a couple concepts that I've picked up from a couple of my favorite writers. And they essentially are saying, let me share with you what they say. First off, one I think that has served me well, especially when it comes to learning how to deal with worry, learning how to imagine the good over the bad, spending my energy there, is this: purposely be aware of your thoughts. Step one, purposely be aware of your thoughts. So again, when you find your mind beginning to like move toward worst case scenario, I'm going to lose my house. I'm going to do this. You go all the way to the extreme. When you notice yourself doing it, simply do this. I just noticed that I went to the worst case scenario. You could even say it to yourself aloud. I just noticed I went there. I don't have to go there. What if I imagine something different, right? I can think about the situation differently. Just the simple action of saying, I can think about this differently. Every time I've done it, it's been really powerful. When I haven't, that's when bad things happen. That's when you literally go there. The negative actually becomes a reality. Another thing that I've picked up that I would love to begin living more regular in my own life. Do I have all the facts, right? Your opinion is your opinion. Your perception's your perception. Do not confuse them with facts or truths, John Moore, right? Do I have all the facts? Ask yourself the questions, right? If I miss some detail, right? Maybe I jumped too quickly to the negative. Maybe there's something much deeper going on that I'm aware of. Ask yourself that question. And usually what happens is we begin to be aware that, there are bigger things going on. And maybe that person said that because of this. Or maybe if I just wait a little bit longer, this thing's going to happen. Stopping and just calming ourselves down, asking questions of the thing, that's so good. And then the last one was this. And again, I'm learning slowly to do it. I'm learning slowly to do what Jesus did by causing them. I can almost see him saying that, like, close your eyes with me. Think about the birds and think about nature. Like he's getting mystical there. He's having them imagine something better. And so the last step, of course, practice visualizing the positive. Visualize it. See it. If you can imagine, again, a negative ending, then you can, of course, imagine a positive one. So why not put your energy there? Right? Take time, purposely imagine the positive over the negative. Remove the fear, the anxiety, and replace it with hope, right? Those are the things Jesus is essentially telling us in this Sermon on the Mount, what to do with worry. So again, notice this. Seek first his kingdom, his righteousness. Align yourself with those things. And beauty and life more abundantly, they just seem to follow. You find you are free from all of those things. Seek goodness, imagine a better world, align yourself with it, and it's there. I hope you enjoyed this little view, this first step into the Sermon on the Mount and what it means and how to live it fully. And again, as always, please consider donating to www.ethos-church.org/donate. Again, we're a nonprofit, and so tax season's coming, right? So please give generously. Help us continue this ministry we're doing. And again, if you find yourself with no community, maybe you've asked some questions, you've outgrown certain things about your tribe, we meet the first and the third online. And we do this really fun, interactive connection where we talk and we share. People from Arizona to Michigan to Orange County to Idaho. We're all talking and chatting together, sharing ideas. It's a safe space for people to grow. So please, if you're interested, please email me at tonywerfel@gmail.com, and we'd love to get you connected. And please consider just click that subscribe button. Hit that little bell there on our YouTube channel and keep up with us, what we're doing, and we'd love to continue keeping you connected. Share these videos with others if you think it'd be helpful. We love you, everyone. Take care, and we can't wait to talk to you next week as we continue delving into the Sermon on the Mount. Bye, everyone.